Bum. Bum, ba-da-bum, bum, bum, bum. So I'm Alessio,
And my name is Maciek.
and we're Mediashake.
Working on Project S.A.M.
Exactly, as usual.
And today we will be talking about player combat and how the game will work.
It's probably we want to talk about it quite early because it's like
It's one of the main components.
it's probably been the focus of the game development process since day one.
Just making sure it gets right
yeah
from the start.
I mean, being a roguelike pixel art, that has to be like the two focuses have to be visual and mechanics, because otherwise, what else have we got going on for us?
Oh, we
Okay,
had
maybe-
to have
yeah.
in the story.
Yeah, maybe not. Let's cut that. Yeah, so it's a
A lot of our combat was inspired by other games of roguelike genre.
I mean, even before that, I would say that's kind of the reason why we started this. Later, when we started the game, we didn't know what we wanted to do, but very quickly we went into roguelike because that's what we really like the genre. And yeah, so obviously a lot of influences came from Enter the Gungeon, Binding of Isaac, these classic roguelikes that sort of paved the way for the rest of them. But the main difference that we wanted to bring to the table is
the difficulty.
Yeah, we felt that as difficult as some of those may be, they relied mostly on bullet hell elements. So like mostly like a bunch of projectiles on the screen.
A lot of just running away from enemies instead of just going up to the enemies and trying to fight them close.
So we wanted to bring in a bit more values from how Dark Souls approached their combat system, where you have powerful enemies that have very powerful attacks, but the player will have the chance to they'll have to dodge at the right time to not get half of the health just wiped away.
And it's also important for the player to move around the enemies instead of just running away from them, because otherwise you will just not do damage to those enemies.
Trying to put in a bit more meta knowledge, so
that's why similar to how Moonlight did it.
Yeah,
we wanted to keep the combat for the player close range, so he always has to interact with the enemies.
Yeah, we'll have again. Moonlighter is a really good example because of that element. And like us, they do have some ranged weapons. I think they've got one
bow.
Yeah, one bow. We're gonna have a bit more, but it's gonna be. We're gonna get into it later in a second, but
we will try to balance it in such a way that melee weapons are always a better option.
Yeah.
But in some circumstances, range is useful.
I mean, that brings us on to the next point, which is the other big difference we did from roguelikes. Again, Moonlighter did this already, so it's nothing new, but having basically a limited pool of weapons. So what Enter the Gungeon and Binding of Isaac do and use really well in their game is having just whatever weapon you pick up, you keep it forever, right, until the end of the run. And as much as that's amazing and fun sometimes, we felt that we wanted to give more strategic decision to the player. So in Moonlighter, you choose the weapons at the beginning. We wanted to mix those two up, basically.
We want the player to make a decision to choose which weapons they want to keep at which stages of the game.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't need a certain weapon after a certain part, based on the enemies that are in different stages.
Yeah, so the way we did that is we first of all we divided the weapons into actives and side weapons, and then we basically gonna give the player 2 slots each, so they're gonna be able to keep 2 main weapons and 2 side weapons, and only use one of each at a time, and switch them however they want. So there's still combination strategic element to go in, but it's limited.
Apart from that, the player also has access to an active trinket, which they will have only one of.
Yeah, usually it will be consumable, or it'll recharge by killing enemies, and also on top of that we'll have the one thing we did keep unlimited is the passive trinkets,
which you basically kind of get every level, and they basically
I think like Slay the Spire did it, Enter the Gungeon, just
your character throughout the game. Making going through the levels actually possible.
And the other thing, the division in weapon types, so main and side weapon, also allowed us to go back to the element of melee versus ranged. Is most of our main weapons are going to be melee based, with maybe some of them will have a ranged attack. So for example, we've designed and implemented a katana, which will have the normal 2 slashes of a weapon to start with, but the third one is like a ranged kind of energy wave.
To the combo system.
Sorry, just before that,
you kind of started talking about it.
The other thing is that, so the main one will mostly be melee, and the side one will mostly be like status based,
kind of weapon,
with most of the ranged weapons being in that category, but doing less damage and more helping statuses, so stunning, or I don't know, whatever
slowing,
rooting, fire, poison, that kind of stuff. And as you were mentioning, we wanted the combat to not feel repetitive, and we wanted each weapon to have their own characteristics. So the way we went about that is by giving each weapon in combos, which doesn't seem too innovative, but I think the way we did it was quite
definitely
interesting.
Spins the combat in a different direction. It's much more methodical.
So
because you have to think what combo count you're at with different weapons and what those different combos do. Because if you do 2 combos, which is 2 clicks, the weapon would do a certain pattern of attacks in those 2 clicks. But let's say you do 3 on the same weapon, the third one would do something else that you have to remember what it does, which brings variety to even if you're using just one weapon.
And it goes back into that element of meta knowledge that we wanted to have, so the knowledge that the player acquires through the game through, rather than having a fixed progression with stats boost, which is the easiest way to do it. We wanted to make the player enjoy the process of learning the game rather than just grinding it out and getting better upgrades. So we are going to have upgrades, but they're not going to be status, maybe a little bit, but mostly going to be they're not going to be stat based, they're mostly going to be status based. So mostly going to have maybe add poison to a certain weapon, or add a knockback, or stuff like that. And that's more to make sure that the player can personalize their experience to how they want to play the game. So if you see
that depends if they find those weapons.
If you find the weapon, but that also goes into the system that we came up with too. So when you're in the hub and you've discovered a weapon and you have enough money, you can then upgrade the weapon. We'll have various upgrades. Again, close, similar, but not the same as Moonlighter did it. So a bit more options and a bit more diversity, probably. Branching out. And the other thing we wanted to add in the hub, in the same place where you can upgrade them, is a chance boost to get that weapon in the game. So let's say you're later on in the stages of the game, you've upgraded your favorite weapon, but as Masik said, you might not get it. So the way we can do that is you can put money in to boost the chance of you getting it in that next run.
There is a reason not to do it, but I think we will talk about this at a later vlog. The money system that will be the backbone of the playthroughs.
That definitely goes into talking about our economy system that we have, and the reason why we're defining our game roguelike and not roguelite. But we can probably devote another vlog to that. I think the other big thing that really surprised me when we implemented it was, and I know you will be like, but the little movement boost that we gave, to the player when he attacks, just changed the way the combat worked in the game completely.
Mate, I was telling you to do that for ages.
What did I just say? What did I just say? Like,
I was telling you to do that for bloody ages.
As a programmer, he might not know.
Works.
He might not know, but there's a lot of other things I need to worry about. Anyway, when I did finally get around to implementing it, it was such a difference that I think it did change a lot. Just the feel of just those little things that change the feel of combat.
Then definitely when it comes to gameplay, a lot of small things matter.
I think that, to be honest, that's probably because we've done a couple of feedback sessions, and I think that's where most of our time doing the incubator has gone to. Now that I think about it,
out what works and what doesn't.
No, especially with the player. Like most of my time doing the incubator was just player.
Mm-hmm.
If I think about it,
yeah,
a little bit of systems for the enemies, but I think that's it.
Mostly making sure the game feels.
That's why random generation got kind of pushed back until now.
The player was the most important.
Because we could still, the way we did it, we had like a simulated version that we made ourselves of what the random generation would do. So that wasn't as important for the demos, but the player piece has to be always the center of attention.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much it. The other thing is dodging. I think there's still a couple of tweaks we can do to that, but that's going to be a main mechanic. We wanted to purposely leave it on low cooldown.
So just to allow the player to have a out when they go in close.
Yeah. So it's always available to you, but you can't do anything else while you do that, and it does leave you a bit vulnerable towards the end.
The trick is using it correctly, otherwise you won't do anything to the enemy, so it puts you at the same position you were when you weren't using the dodge.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, what I see a lot of people that play the game doing is just dodging around and not doing any damage. So it's the idea to use it at the correct...
Or just standing in front of the enemy and dying. That's the two extremes I've seen. So it's just, again, it goes back to meta knowledge and knowing when to dodge against certain enemies, which direction to dodge against a certain part of the combo of the enemies, because enemies have smaller combo, but they have combo pieces in them, especially elites. Elites they're going to be like bigger version of the normal
enemies, and they will have more abilities to work with.
Yeah, and the other thing is bosses, which we didn't talk about actually, which follow a bit the enemy design, but have a bit of a different combat system. So we ended up having a pattern-based combat, which is similar to old school sort of vertical shooters bosses, if you remember. Galaga, I think is the name.
The bosses will be similar to how bosses are done classically, where you have multiple stages. You do something to the boss. For example, we have the Scorpion boss, where first you have to destroy both claws that the Scorpion is using, which will change up its attack patterns.
Yeah.
And will do different things depending on what stage it's at.
Yeah, and we'll have a couple that will like change depending on where the player is, but most of them will just be a flat pattern, and basically the player will have to learn where in that space they have to be to not get hit, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whilst at the same time trying to figure out the best way to get close to the boss to deal damage. So is this always this backwards and forward between how much health do I want to lose compared to how much damage I'm going to do.
And you don't want to
if you can lose the health as much as possible, but at the same time if you're not doing damage, then you're wasting time. You're
not really winning.
Yeah. So those are basically all the elements that went into deciding the combat, and
it's making sure it works.
It's been a long process, but I think we came up with something that we're happy with, and hopefully you will like it too.
Yeah. Well, and that's it for this vlog, and we will speak to you next time.
We'll be back.
Have a nice day.
Bye bye.